Elves, a race of nigh immortal beings which sit on the side of perfection. Wielding an air of timeless mystique, they have an eye for beauty and a deep respect for nature across their long lives in most fantasy settings. However, their lives aren't without fault either, as they are uniquely poised in any story to experience the passing of the ages. In our video today, rather than discussing what I hate about elves like in this video I most recently watched, I'm gonna take a more positive approach to this subject. I'm gonna talk about why I love them instead, and how I believe they hold so much untapped potential as a storytelling device that I just haven't seen media portray very well. I wish to explore their meaning and depth from a more narrative standpoint, from what we've made elves represent as a collective society to what they can be when we break that mold, and try to transcend what we've created the traditional elf to be in fantasy media that we've seen so far. With introductories due in our video here, hello everyone, I'm Zag, and if you're coming across me for the first time, I'm a professional storyteller, or in other words, a pro DM with over 10,000 hours under my belt, and here on YouTube I typically make systems for D&D and talk about how they can enhance your play of the tabletop game we all know and love. From my Ashes of War inspired battle art system to my Jujutsu Kaisen inspired spellbinding system, there's a lot here and more you can find over on my Patreon, The Mythweaver's Loom, which by the way also includes a world building project. Well, projects, multiple worlds. And with my content plug out of the way, today's video is going to be a little different from what I usually post here on my channel. You see, I recently watched a video by a YouTuber called Curious Archive, where he discusses what he hates about elves and the general consensus of why they're so disliked. And honestly, my immediate reaction was to make a positive counterpart to the video, so much so that my mind was blasting with various examples to paint out for why we should be more appreciative of our long-eared counterparts. And during this video, I'll be discussing primarily the elves we are all used to, the ones found in our fantasy media most typically, the tall, slender, beautiful archetype of elf that you either have played once in your D&D games or have seen characterized in things like Dragon Age, Lord of the Rings, or even the Witcher series. I know that there are many different types of elves that exist, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be focusing on just the ones you've most likely encountered, with the goal in mind for this video to maybe have you see elves in a more positive light and maybe even get that creativity flowing for just what an elf-themed story can produce, because I firmly believe that in fantasy, we're only really scraping the tip of the iceberg for what stories can look like with an elf-centric character driving the narrative forward. For part 1 of our video, we have to identify what are elves. We all know elves represent a type of timelessness that we may even long for as the people who write them, a sense of connection with nature that I feel we as humans desire as a part of who we are. Maybe it's the internal instinct that we've kept as a type of evolutionary relic from when we had to hunt and gather for our food. For as long as we, as humans, have lived, we have been connected to nature, sometimes in a way that we can't even explain. You see, we are all one with the world and it is one with us. I think that in our technology-bound lives, a part of us wish to connect now more than ever with this type of narrative, to go out and truly be one with nature, since in our real lives, many of us are trapped in unnatural landscapes of city blocks and urban suburbias. Elves can also represent our longing for near eternal life. For as long as we've existed as a people, we have sought to live forever by any means necessary. Most of these attempts end in these same means actually game ending the person they're supposed to make immortal in the first place. Elves represent a type of lasting youth that we as mortal beings can long for, as the unknown of the future is scary. Getting older is scary. Why not add a couple extra centuries into that lifespan of yours and see what you can accomplish, right? You see, those are the two examples of what I can articulate that elves mean for us as a society. But now I want to turn our eyes onto the second part of our video. What can elves be to a narrative? Oftentimes, elves are used as foils for other characters with shorter lives, while usually never getting much of the spotlight themselves. It's mostly because they've been sort of typecasted as giant jerks who look down on almost everyone with a dab of superiority on there. It's here I want to evolve the Elvish mythos to try and expand upon the possibilities of what may be possible when having an Elvish character as a part of a narrative. For this, we can look at the animated series Dota Dragon's Blood, and big spoilers ahead for those of you who have not seen it. You've been warned. You see, in the story of Dota Dragon's Blood, you have an Elvish character named the Invoker. His backstory is that he fell in love with a goddess and they had a child together. However, when this child fell ill, the goddess wanted no less than worship from her own daughter in order to be saved. However, the daughter, in wanting a mother and not a goddess, declined and soon after died. It is during this series that the Invoker often helps the protagonist of the story in order to get what he wants, his daughter back. This includes watching entire universes be undone and remade just so he can create the perfect scenario, the perfect sequence of causalities, just so that he can finally have a future with his daughter that he was wrongfully denied by the goddess. He watched, and as the series poignantly states, 12,403 universes die out, all for the one, where he finally gets to watch his daughter grow up into a confident person she was always meant to be. This is extremely human to me. The idea of going through such lengths for someone you care about and love, it's more than just applying a human emotion to a nigh timeless being. It is that emotion being taken to its absolute extreme. It is the idea being taken to its limits, because even if we can't relate to their eternal lives, we can relate to the very human pain that they go through, which is what can make an Elvish character extremely relatable. For my second example, I'll bring up everyone's favorite silver-haired elf, Fririn. Despite Fririn's nonchalant and uninterested attitude towards most things, we can still find ourselves relating quite heavily to her and her journey. Because she is shown to experience what we all do, happiness, wonder, and loss throughout her travels, you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, well, of course, but this is a far cry from the stereotype we've given them as perfect beings of beauty who can make no mistakes. Take the elves that we see in Lord of the Rings, for instance. These faraway beings that any other character in the series thoroughly has a tough time relating to, especially the dwarves. They appear as almost having transcended us, only to reveal later in the story that they are just as flawed as we are, and in that way it humanizes them. I do, however, find that this dependency on flawed-based humanization often means that elves occupy an antagonistic role in most stories. Because of this, we rarely in a story see that an elf is in fact the hero. Even for Fririn, despite playing a crucial role in saving the world, they're not remembered by most a generation after Himmel's death, but Himmel himself is. And it is this curious correlation that is something I'll be bringing up later in this video as a primary point. But along with this, I've been seeing a trend where elves and stories are becoming more and more relatable as time goes on, and as we break away from your stereotypical Tolkien-esque elves and enter a more nuanced territory with them. For this example, we're gonna go dive into everyone's favorite quote-unquote elf, Marcel from Dungeon Meshi. The characterization and quirkiness of Marcel are what draw everyone to her character. The way in which she acts betrays what we've normally seen of an elf in media. She's not only capable, but extremely goofy, and is knowledgeable about the world of magic, so much so that her nuanced opinion on dark magic not only makes sense to us, the viewers, but drives us to root for her awakening these dark potential powers, not because we want her to be evil, but because we want to see what good she can do with something seen as bad or evil within the confines of this world. For those unaware, ancient or forbidden magic is outlawed across the world of Dungeon Meshi. However, Marcel holds the opinion that it's not dark, it's just not fully understood. An opinion she most likely has due to her elven heritage, allowing her to have a more nuanced view on the subject. She's had and will have plenty of time to demystify forbidden magic across her long lifespan and bring its potential to the world. I think Marcel is one of the most relatable elves ever depicted, But much like any elf, even Marcel has fears over the exact same thing that any elf does in a world where the nigh eternal intermix with the mortal. And this serves as the perfect bridge for the third part of our video. How long lives truly affect you. You see, there is an element of elves I almost never see explored nowadays, and that's the views one would have over a long life. Think about this for a second. You're an elf, say born in the 1800s. Throughout your long life, you'd have seen society go from lighting up its streets with torches to gas-powered lamps and then to light bulbs. You live through one of the most innovative periods in human history. You see the first automobiles being made, then commercially ridden in the streets as they begin to slowly replace horse-drawn carriages. You watch as people go from sending letters to instant telecommunication over vast, unimaginable distances. You watch as society itself transforms as the first airplanes are made and work miraculously. Then you speed things up a bit to the television, and then to color on the television. Then all of a sudden those massive computers that you heard about in different labs now fit comfortably inside a small box on your desk. But among identifying all these wonders, I want to highlight something about being born 200 years ago. Something I think a lot of people miss. Your mentality would be probably much the same. Maybe a few tweaks here and there, but for the most part, you would have the same mentality that you did in your first 100 years of life that you'd have in the next 100 years of your life. You have to think like an elf. You're going to be alive for hundreds of years, close to a millennia. Why change? We see this phenomenon with people even now in our short 80 to 100 years of life on this planet. Older folks who are, from our perspective, quite stuck in their ways, but that's just how they grew up, and they grew up in a practically different world than we did. And sure, that lack of change can be expressly viewed as negative. And most times it kind of is. It can halt progress. But you know, the evolution of ideas are good. But in the context of a fantasy world, having an archetype of character that remains stalwart for a cause they believe in due to their long lifespans can be a massive boon to said world. Imagine you champion a cause that's now forgotten about by many of the common folk, many of the short-lived mortals. A great evil is said to return one day. An apocalyptic event was prophesied centuries ago, and you're here as the only person fighting to this day to stop it, while everyone looks at you like you're insane. Not because you are, but because you remember. Champions like this are extremely necessary because they're the only ones who remember. I think of Qual, a demon from Free Ren who created Zoltrak, a spell designed to kill humans by directly, basically blowing up their body. In a battle little under a century ago, he was sealed away by Free Ren herself. Free Ren never forgot about this and returned to defeat Qual long after the allies who were there when he was originally sealed have passed away. But if Free Ren was human, then she very well would have passed away long before Qual was unsealed, and then there wouldn't have been anyone to stop him. Taking this idea of elves being champions for causes lost to history, in my eyes they become a type of living relic in a fantasy world. And the great tragedy of the elven mind is that these champion causes drive their reasons for a purpose. These strong emotions linked to a greater cause would be why they aren't forgotten in the first place. Because as we know with memory, there can be a lot of hardships with handling it. Memories fade and obfuscate as time passes. And tragically, memories always appear better than they probably actually ever did in the first place in most cases. These memories can also be like poison to the mind, weighing it down and causing distinctly negative experiences to turn ever more sour as time passes, building resentment. An elf would have a lifetime of dealing with these emotions, with these memories that are tied to them, and making sure to keep them in check. Elves would be highly susceptible to this phenomenon due to their long lives. The great tragedy behind them, in my eyes, could be an elf trying to keep the memories fresh, but fighting against the mind's want to allow things to fade with time. Your allies might not only die once, but potentially a second time, once you've forgotten them. I guess this would give reason for elves to love art, song, and dance, as music and stories would allow them to immortalize their fallen allies, friends, and lovers. And now we go on to part 4 of our video, the curse of the living relic. Remember how I spoke about Friven and the fact that no one really seems to remember her, but they remember those she traveled with. This was a reoccurring phenomenon that I kept seeing throughout the series wherever Friven went. There were memories of Himmel being left behind as statues, and her other companions were seemingly unforgettable. But it seems like she was. This led to me making a rather profound conclusion, in that mortals wield a type of power that nigh immortal beings can't. We can become history itself. Mortals have this power to imprint themselves and almost transcend their mortality in a way that elves could only ever dream of. This is mostly accomplished through becoming a legend or an integral part of history itself, like Himmel being the hero that killed the Demon King. This idea fundamentally derives from the fact that you cannot be remembered in history if you are history itself. One does not become a true legend if they're alive. They become so once they've already passed on. They're remembered in memoriam. Can you really be remembered if you're still alive? That's a really interesting question that I have, but haven't quite found an answer to just yet. Funnily enough, I looked to a not fantasy series, but a cyberpunk series, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, for the answer, and that the only way to have a drink named after you at one of the most well-known bars in the city is to go out in a blaze of glory, a celebration of how you died and not how you lived, a showing of proof of how you left your mark on this world. Elves don't get such a luxury. They're either blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it, to live drastically longer lives, to become living relics of history, ever reflective of the time period they were raised in, creating a rich set of characters who can hail from different sections and parts of history, and how that part of history itself shaped their beliefs today. They would be timeless bards and poets who continue the traditions most have forgotten through art and song, carrying history with them like a walking history book. Elves to me represent the fantastical in our stories, a reminder for us to start thinking outside the box, to begin to consider other perspectives outside our own, in such a vastly different way that you could argue it's almost inhuman, yet there's this humanity that exists within. A type of relatability that I've always had a hard time putting into words, so I went and found a new one. Like us, elves would experience déjà vu, the awareness that the moment will become a memory. For us, we may live just short enough to never forget anything in our entire lives, but they do, and it is that wish to hold on to what you would define as your most precious memory that I find to be so beautiful. It is in that desire I find myself able to easily empathize with our long-haired friends so heavily. And if it is anything that makes me love them, it is the quiet tragedy of a long life. And in this tragedy, they set out to make a mark upon the world, even if they're ultimately forgotten as a living relic in the process. They exist both in the present and the past, carrying the memories of those they've met throughout their journey well into the future. If it be wanting to see someone you love get a shot at life, traveling around the world to meet someone you feel your time with was just all too short, or utilizing your long lifespan to the study of helping others and demystifying the forbidden. Whatever the cause may be, I support our elvish friends along their journey, curious to see how they preserve our world in their hands. And that, my friends, is why I kind of love elves. With us reaching the end of this video, I highly appreciate all of you for sticking around until the end. If you liked the video and wish to see more content like this from me, go ahead and leave a like And if you want to come along and hopefully see more of these deep dives into my favorite aspects of fantasy, go ahead and subscribe while you're at it. For those that might be here for the first time, I also have some world building projects I'm cooking up, so you'll get to see those and see how I bring my fantasy world to life there. And leave a comment about why you kind of sort of love elves, or maybe even kind of sort of hate them. I'd love to read whatever you have to say regardless. But with that, my friends, I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Oh yeah, I'm working on a limit break system for D&D for my next project. Okay, bye.